We need to be absolutely blunt as a nation. Another innocent little girl is dead, and once again, the people who should have protected her were too scared to act. Ask yourself why. Because in Britain today, it's apparently worse to be accused of racism than it is to ignore a child being beaten, tortured, and ultimately killed. The tragic case of Sara Sharif, just 10 years old, is a damning indictment of a society that's utterly paralysed by fear, fear of words and fear, frankly, of baseless accusations. The horror that that child endured should never, ever have happened. Broken bones, burns, injuries so severe that they frankly defy comprehension. And yet there was no intervention. Why? Because asking questions about a bruised child suddenly coming to school wearing a hijab might, God forbid, upset someone's cultural sensitivities. And let's be clear, this isn't an isolated issue, it's a pattern. You've seen it time and again. The authorities tiptoe around certain issues and abuse within them, terrified of being branded as bigots. But what's truly bigoted is valuing multicultural dogma over a child's life. If the inquest into Sara's death doesn't examine the toxic culture of fear that let us slip through the cracks, then it's not worth the paper it's written on. And the real racism, well, the real racism is pretending that little girls like Sara and the girls in Rotherham, Telford and Oldham aren't worth protecting. Little Sharif deserved a world more than she actually received. She deserved to live in a country that put her life and her safety above a little bit of middle-class politically correct discomfort. If we don't learn from this tragedy, from her tragedy, then we're complicit in the next one. No more excuses. No more looking the other way. It's time to stand up for British values and actually stop apologising for them. Reading that, Renee, you're a mum, you must have thought, it's heartbreaking, it was horrible.
Do you know, for me, as a mum and a doctor, there are so many elements of it that are heartbreaking. Not only that anyone could inflict pain and suffering on a child, any child, but also that we're going to have the same, we will learn lessons from this. The lessons are clear. There's too many agencies with too many gaps in between that don't talk to each other and everybody's too scared to act. Someone should have stepped forward and taken a decision about that little girl. She was on the at-risk register when she was born.
I mean, the Times are reporting today that she was effectively handed over to someone who was on the sex offenders register. You know, it's that sort of... You just can't comprehend that this is allowed to happen in this country.
And a little girl who goes all the way through school, not looking like her family were particularly religious, and then she suddenly turns up with a headscarf.
Yeah.
Somebody should ask questions about that, and they shouldn't be scared to ask questions about that. What has happened that you're suddenly wearing a headscarf? Can we take it off? Are we allowed to look? She was covering up injuries, or she wasn't. The people who were injuring her were.
Yeah, it's more of this politically correct nonsense that we saw that led to the grooming gang epidemic in this country.
Yeah.
It's cover-up after cover-up and failure after failure of the services that are designed to defend young children, to defend young girls, young boys and whoever else from these types of people. That is constantly letting Britain down. It makes this country, well, it puts this country backwards, decades, centuries even. This is not stuff that we should be talking about in 2024, but
It
yet
does,
we are.
and make no mistake, there are plenty of British people that have abused their children. This is not a culture, but what we must never have anywhere is barriers to going forward and saying no.
Well, just to read out that Times article, it says the council that supported Sara Sharif's father and eventual murderer being given custody was previously reprimanded for placing a girl with an accused paedophile relation who allegedly went on to abuse her. I mean, these kinds of failures, you know, I just can't get over it. And I'm worried, not that the report won't find failures, I'm sure it will, but that actually the report won't cover absolutely everything that needs to be covered there. Were there failings due to political correctness, effectively?
Yeah, there are some stories that we talk about that are so morally reprehensible and so shocking that it is actually really difficult to actually come to the so what or the point behind this. And there is obviously institutional failures that are based on incompetence. There is an ideological evil here that we need to come to grips with. The ideological evil is that for too long on the left, they have conflated culture with race. That is why there is the fear in institutions. It is the fear of being smeared as a racist if you go in and you make legitimate criticisms about a cultural subgroup. Make no mistake, this proves beyond any shadow of a doubt there are cultural issues at play in ethnic minority groups in this country, and that is worthy of investigation. And if we don't make the separation between race and culture, more instances like this will happen.
Benjamin, one of our viewers says, called Celia, says, welcome back, Benjamin, even if you're a lefty.
I'm also on a sinking chair, so... yeah, if I disappear under the table...
That is a welcome back.
That's why...
That was our gift to you.
I don't think this was missed because of the culture, because when you read the culture of the victims and of the family, the abusers, because when you read the evidence, there were so many times when they did spot the abuse and the harm, and I remember reading that this girl would run away from her father when he tried to come near her. So it was absolutely obvious, and so I think it'd be too simplistic to say, well, there were cultural barriers, because clearly you have a situation whereby the people whose job it is to safeguard kids, for whatever reason, don't have the power or feel they have the power to actually step in and safeguard kids.
Well, I think the failure potentially is more around the media and the reporting side and the fear there of being smeared as being bigots. And this is a trend that has started with Rotherham, and we're seeing it more and more. The accountability mechanisms from other institutions aren't there to hold rubbish, departments of government to account.
I guess the question is, Benjamin, I think you're right. I think there were plenty of opportunities that they could have intervened. There was 15 missed opportunities to save this little girl's life. The question is why they didn't.
Can I ask you as a GP, if someone comes in, a child comes in and they have bruises or something that isn't explainable, how hard is it for you to raise that with a parent or to pass that on to services?
Well, I have a child at the moment that I've just pushed through to services, and services are actually finding it quite hard to interact with the parents, and I'm having to say to them, it doesn't matter. Ignore the parents. You need to find out what's going on with this child. So I think it depends on the GP and how hard you're prepared to push it. I feel very passionately about children, and I'll push it to the lengths that I will. But I think sometimes if you're getting pushback that we've investigated and we think it's fine, a point does come, I guess, where a GP would say, OK, if you've investigated it and you think it's fine.
But do you honestly think, though, Benjamin, that if the dad had been a white fella from Dagenham, that there wouldn't have been more of a push to get this little girl into safety?
Well, I mean, there's certainly a track record of white fellas beating their wives and beating kids historically, so, it's not as though that doesn't happen a lot.
No, I agree.
And I think there is actually, if there's a cultural problem, it's one that may be more acute in this community but exists generally, which is this idea that you can hit your kid and there's sort of an acceptable way to hit your kid. And I think that grey area is extremely counter-productive.
Well, I think most parents know the difference between smacking your child so hard that they have to wear a hijab to go to school and reprimanding them for being naughty.
I'm sure they do, but as far as I'm concerned, this illustrates that smacking your kid should be, as it is in Wales, I think, illegal.
No, I don't think
you should not be able to hit your kid in any form.
I don't think it
and
does.
that would empower those kids. I mean, this one was particularly young, but you get kids that are told, well, I'm not breaking the law because I can smack you, that's legal. It shouldn't be.
Do you think a young woman in an Asian household would be empowered by an anti-smacking law?
Well, you would hope that when they go to school, they would feel acceptable to speak to a teacher. But look, there's no doubt that it would be very difficult, but it'd be very difficult for any child.
And then the school, though, says, oh, we can't do anything about that because, the bogeyman in the room.
Still watching? Well, I've got a quick ask for you. Recent UK, we're fighting the woke brigade and inspiring young Brits, but we need your help to go bigger. We're hosting a fundraiser and would love you to sign up and share the link on the big day. It's easy, it makes a massive impact, and there are prizes for top fundraisers. Click the Google form in the description to join us. Cheers very much. Let's keep going together.